Hello to all of you, illustrious advocates and warriors and pioneers in this field. I'm humbled, I am honored, and I am not a little bit outclassed to be here today. I would particularly like to thank Dushiksa for inviting me to be in Harry's stead. I'm actually not supposed to be here. The person who is supposed to be here is named Harry Leibowitz, and Harry and his wife Kay founded an organization called World of Children over 20 years ago. I'm an extremely proud board member. I've traveled the world with Harry and Kay, and Harry is terribly sorry that he cannot be present. World of Children is his life's greatest passion, except for Kay, and I know I'm on camera, so I'm smart enough to say that. And I'm sorry because, first of all, you will miss the pleasure of his speaking. He is eloquent and he is passionate, and he's a wonderful public speaker. And B, you are now subjected to my somewhat less compelling presentation. So if you wanted to have a cigarette or get more coffee, it's a good time to do it now. The World of Children has been called the Nobel Prize for Child Advocates, and it has honored over 120 changemakers working in over 60 countries around the world. World of Children is a remarkable organization. It recognizes and funds community-based organizations that do all of the heavy lifting on the ground. We are merely a conduit for funding. We are a vehicle for publicizing the real heroes. World of Children is not important. Our honorees are. And every one of our honorees passes an extremely rigorous vetting process. It makes Interpol look lazy. And we take great pride in making sure that our funds go exactly where they're supposed to be. I think all too often some of the worst perpetrators are masquerading as help. And it is important to distinguish between who is helping and who is just saying they're helping. Human trafficking, sexual violence, slavery, the abuse of children, these are all too familiar to World of Children. And one of the recipients of our 2016 Protection Award was here today. I think you saw her in the video, for her remarkable work at the Incest Trauma Center. A woman named Carol Sasaki received our 2007 Humanitarian Award for her work at the International Humanity Foundation. And Triveni Archaya, a favorite of mine, received our Rescue Award in 2015. All of these women have something in common. Something wonderful and something terrible. It's wonderful in that they've lived a life in service of rescuing the most vulnerable, the most violated, and the most voiceless young lives. Terrible in that their work appears to be never-ending. And they're hardly alone in this fight. All you have to do is look at all the people who are assembled in this room today. You know, I've spent a lot of time working on issues of sexual violence. I play a character whose name is Alex Cabot on a show called Law & Order Special Victims Unit. And the show was actually originally called the Sex Crimes Unit, because that's what it's called in New York City. But at the time, NBC, the network that the show airs on, thought that that was too violent a word for American television. So it is known as Law & Order SVU. Alex, my character, is an assistant district attorney, and her job is to prosecute the perpetrators of sex crimes. When I started on SVU, the conviction rate for a sex crime was 4%. 4%, and that is 4% of the cases who were brought to the attention of the authorities. I have no idea how many acts of violence are never reported, never witnessed, never creep into the light of day. I think we talked about that in an earlier part of the panel. I don't think anybody really knows those numbers. And who knows how many of the authorities around the world who profess to care about these monstrous crimes, who knows how much they're actually going to do about it? You know, I live in the United States, which is arguably one of the wealthiest and one of the most powerful nations in the world. Also, apologies for the United States right now. There's a man named Jeffrey Epstein, a financier, and he's accused of operating a sex ring of underage girls. Jeffrey Epstein lived in a Manhattan penthouse that is 3 blocks from where I reside with my husband. The famous singer R. Kelly has been taken into custody for an over 13-count indictment that includes enticement of a minor, child pornography, and 4 counts of violating the Mann Act. Now, the Mann Act prohibits the transportation of people across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. There is no corner of the planet that is safe for an underage, undervalued, and underrepresented child. None. And I think that there's this myth that with the passage of time and the progression of our values and our modern sensibilities, that these acts of violence are going to diminish. And in fact, there really doesn't appear to be any shortage of events for the horror movie that is constantly playing out. Rape as a tool of war, women promised employment and then turned into chattel, children who are born into a government system that barely recognizes them and takes zero notice of them when they disappear. And they almost always disappear forever. These stories are too numerous to count. I don't have to tell you that. I don't have any information that you do not have. I have far less information than you have in terms of data. But I can tell you that there is a little bit of good news. Because there are other stories to tell. There are other myths and there are other legends. There's the goddess Nike. There's Joan of Arc. There's Boudica. There's Zenobia. There's Nakano Taneko. These are real life, honest to God, present in this very room warriors. And just as I am reviled by the recounting of all of the monstrosities, I am inspired by the stories of the survivors and the heroes who work in this field. I believe in the power of storytelling. We all know why we're in this room, but people who cannot be in this room have to understand why we are here doing what we're doing. I believe in the power of our collective voice. I believe in social media, social protest, real reporting aired on legitimate news outlets. I believe it matters. I believe it matters so strongly that we share our information, that the greater our power grows, the more information we share. I'm really proud of the work that I did on SVU. It was one of the first shows ever to talk about sexual violence on TV, and I do think it has changed the dialogue in America. I don't mean me personally. I mean the fact that the show on television was willing to address that content, sexual violence, in each and every episode, made a difference in our national dialogue. And my colleague and dear friend, Mariska Hargitay, started a campaign 2 years ago. It's called No More. And that's exactly what it meant. No more. She did a series of videos, everyone wore a t-shirt, and it was no more. No more hitting, no more neglecting, no more child abuse, no more rape. We cannot and we will not rely on people in power to care, because they often don't. And we can't hope that people who have the opportunity are not going to exploit, because they do. We will not be guided by just our morality, we will be guided by our voices. And every time there is an episode of a TV show that addresses child rape, or a movie that depicts rape as a tool of war, or a documentary about servants, slaves toiling in darkness, every time we see that kind of programming, we shine a light in a dark place. And those people out there, I don't know what else to call them, they're the bad guys. The bad guys are relying on silence and secrecy to continue to do what they do. The secret, and we are no longer going to be silent. Not today, not tomorrow, not next year, not the next election, whatever your next election is, not when they tell us they're going to take our jobs and the rights to our own bodies. We will not be silent. We will tell these stories, and we will bring new warrior goddesses to life. We will have the power to have these stories, and we sure as hell will tell them. And not just to each other, but to people in the larger world, other people in other rooms who need to hear all of you talk. Thank you for having me.